guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a drama from South Korea, Korean language English subs, released in the year 2005, directed by Park Chan-wook, and this film is called Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. So Sympathy for Lady Vengeance takes place with a 19-year-old, a stunningly beautiful 19-year-old, and she's part of a criminal organisation. Now this organisation specialises in kidnapping, and there's one particular kidnapping that goes horribly wrong, and the boss wants her to take the fall for it. And so she reluctantly does this because the repercussions if she refuses are very severe. So she goes in, she serves a 13-year prison sentence, which she sees as destroying her life. And so she exacts a plan of revenge upon this boss, who she seems responsible for this. And so during her prison sentence, she befriends some inmates, so they're going to prove pivotal in her plan in order to get that redemption. And so whether or not she can, as soon as she leaves the prison, is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. When it comes to Korean cinema, I am absolutely in love with Korean cinema, and Park Chan-wook, although he's not my favourite Korean director, he's definitely a director that holds a very special place for me, is because it was the first experience I had. Oldboy, which is universally known. If you haven't seen it, you've probably heard of it. Oldboy was the movie that opened the door to the wonders of Korean cinema, and after seeing Oldboy, I was just completely blown away. Then I saw Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which was another movie in the trilogy, and it wasn't quite as good as Oldboy, but it still had really impressive qualities. And so for that reason, I branched out into other Korean films, and unfortunately I overlooked Lady Vengeance. And so I came into other brilliant directors such as Bong Joon-ho, who created Parasite, that won a lot of awards at the Academy Awards. You've got Hong Ji-na, who made The Chasing and The Wailing, and also Kim Ji-woon, who's my favourite Korean director, who created I Saw the Devil, The Quiet Family, and also Bittersweet Life. So these are Korean directors that are absolutely phenomenal. But after Mr. Vengeance, I kind of skipped over Lady Vengeance, and that was a great shame, because I really thought as though this is the director who deserves to have his whole trilogy seen. And so I finally saw Lady Vengeance, and I will say that this was a great way to cap off what was a phenomenal trilogy of revenge. Now, what Park Chan-wook does that is a lot different from other revenge movies is that he paints violence in a very realistic way. Now, when it comes to cinematic violence, it's very cathartic, it's very satisfying, is that these bad people that are doing bad things to good people, and a good person gets their revenge, and you think to yourself, all right, they deserve that, now I feel good. But that's not treating violence for what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a spot for violence in cinema, because violence can make the best cinema, is that it's theatrical, and it's traditional. Is that the revenge, the aspect of revenge, it's the whole point of it is to feel good. But then in reality, is it going to make you feel good? And this is what Park Chan-wook, he poses that question. Do you feel good? Is that violence is a very, very ugly thing, and although it's been inflicted upon you, do you have justification to inflict that same ugliness upon the perpetrator? And so Lady Vengeance, all of these movies, you basically throw out that question, but none so more than Lady Vengeance. I will say that this is on par with Oldboy. I'm not quite sure which one I think is better, but Lady Vengeance, what it does so well is that it paints violence for just the sheer ugliness that it is. It's a vicious cycle of destruction, and that this woman, played brilliantly by Young A. Lee, who is this woman that is very beautiful on the outside and very innocent on the inside, and when she's thrown into prison, she is exacting her revenge. And now this is the revenge that's going to make her feel good, it's going to redeem her, it's going to make all of her problems go away. But the thought of violence doesn't match the actual act of violence. And so what she's fantasizing about, the wonders of, getting the revenge and giving this boss what she believes he deserves, the overall thought of it, romanticizing it, is nothing like the reality. And so I thought the way that Park Chan-wook makes this movie, he's interweaving the fantasy of violence with the reality of violence, and the contrasting differences make it a very, very emotional and powerful experience. And so this wouldn't have been possible without the brilliant performance of Young A. Lee, who I am not really familiar with. I will say that she's stunningly beautiful, but the way she portrays her character I thought was so complex in a 3D dimension. The way that her eyes are welling up, her body language, I thought, all right, well, she's basically a symbolization of the angel of death. She's got a beautiful look, but she is there to exact God's justice. And so when she does, I thought, all right, the symbolization of the angel of death is there, and there's a certain beauty to that. But unfortunately, there is that contrasting underbelly that violence plays in everyday life, and violence is basically carnage, and it doesn't necessarily make you feel better, and it's not going to change your past. And this is basically what the film does. It's a whirlwind of tragedy, is that this woman is going to do horrible things, but it's not going to change her set of circumstances. It's not going to change her past, and things aren't going to get back to normal. And so I never felt as though she was feeling good about what she was doing, but she felt as though she had an obligation to do it in basically in respect to what has actually happened to her. I have to be very careful not to give anything away, but it's that whirlwind of emotion and the conflicting emotions that you have that I thought were absolutely brilliant. So as I said, Park Chan-wook, the way he uses the camera, the way he interlocks each scene is very unique to his style. You can tell when you've got a brilliant filmmaker, when you don't need to be told that you're watching a movie of his, just his style will give you that indication. You've got Gaspar Noé, you've got Lars von Trier, also Jean-Pierre Jeunet from France. These directors where you think to yourself, all right, well, I don't need to be told this is a so-and-so film. I know it is because of their trademark style. And Park Chan-wook is definitely one of these directors, and he creates a very beautiful film through the fantasy element, but then a very ugly film through the reality of the whole thing. And so there's a very dreamlike and captivating quality that the movie has that has your eyes glued to the screen from start to finish. This is a film that is never boring, is because when you might associate something boring in a traditional sense, because it's in a dreamlike way, you just captivated and you're entranced by what's going on in front of you. And so on one hand it's a beautiful film, but on the other hand it's an ugly sort of film. And so the beauty is through the romanticizing of vengeance, but the ugliness is through the sheer reality of that act of vengeance. And basically the reality doesn't match the fantasy. And so I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. You have some cameo performances from Kang Ho Song, who was in previous movies. He's also of Park Chan-wook. He was also in Parasite. And you also got Min Sik Choi. Min Sik Choi was the boss. He is definitely one of the most recognisable Korean actors, and his performance was actually very heartbreaking too. So the whole film, combining with a phenomenal soundtrack that just creates emotion, the film pulls at the heartstring. The film is devastating without being melodramatic, and so it's the director who knows exactly what he's doing. He knows his limitations, and he is just excelling in the world that he creates. And the world he does create is just a very haunting film. There is one scene in particular near the end. I have to be very careful not to give anything away, but it involves some people watching something. Now, I'm not going to tell you any more, but that was devastating. That was one of the hardest scenes I have ever seen. And that is basically summing up what the whole film is, what the whole trilogy is. It's violence used in a way that is very destructive, very, very ugly, and how it moulds people in very different ways. And so if this sounds like your kind of thing, this is masterful Korean film work. I'm going to give Lady Vengeance 4.5 stars. Alright guys, this is my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.